Now, when Big Ben strikes 10 in a general election, of course, we release our exit poll to give the first indication of who's won. For the referendum, it's not going to be possible. Exit polls work if they do by comparing one election with another and measuring the change. It'd be crazy to compare this European referendum with the one that was held 41 years ago. It wouldn't work. So patience is our watchword tonight as we wait for the first actual declarations to come through. So Big Ben has struck 10 o'clock, and we can now start trying to discover which side thinks has carried the day on the basis of the results that come in. Some of the polling booths, I said they were all closed, are staying open apparently because the weather's been so frightful in parts of Britain today that if you're in the queue to vote, the polling booth stays open until you get the chance to vote. In 1975, by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are absolutely clear now that there is no way that the Remain side can win. It looks as though the gap's going to be something like 52 to 48, so a 4-point lead for leaving the EU. And that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is, we're out. Laura.
Well, so rare that a country, as individuals, we get the chance to take a decision as big as this. This was the most profound question we had been asked for decades as a nation of voters.
Hier sind die Nachrichten der DW live aus Berlin. Ein neuer Tag bricht an in Europa und eine neue Zeit. Großbritannien wird die Europäische Union verlassen. Die Briten haben mehrheitlich für den Brexit gestimmt. Es war eine dramatische Entscheidung in Großbritannien. Das Brexit-Lager hat sich durchgesetzt. Die EU-Gegner feiern ihren Sieg. Nigel Farage, Chef der rechtspopulistischen UKIP-Partei, spricht von Großbritanniens Unabhängigkeitstag. Herzlich willkommen, ich bin Kerstin Dausend. Schockwellen jagen heute Morgen durch Europa. Und Großbritannien ist ein zutiefst gespaltenes Land. Der Brexit kommt. Es sind inzwischen fast alle Wahlkreise ausgezählt. Und der Vorsprung, den das Leave-Lager hat, ist nicht mehr einzuholen. Hier der Stand nach 380 ausgezählten Bezirken von 382 Bezirken insgesamt. 48,1% wollen danach in der EU bleiben. 51,9% haben für einen Austritt Großbritanniens aus der EU gestimmt. Die Zielmarke unten rechts, die Anzahl der Stimmen, die für einen Sieg nötig sind, hat das Leave-Lager bereits erreicht.
Good morning and welcome to On the Move. I'm Caroline Hyde in Berlin alongside Guy Johnson in the City of London. We are just moments away from the start of European trading. Here is your morning brief. Goodbye, Europe. The United Kingdom votes to leave the European Union. Will this be remembered as the day that broke the EU? Market mayhem. The pound hits a 1985 low in its biggest move in the history. The yuan breaks through 100. Gold soars, banks get battered. Can central banks stabilise
Just opening
sentiment?
up, let's show you exactly what is happening. We are starting to get an idea of how these European equity markets are going to be performing.
كاميرون يعلن الاستقالة من منصبه نهاية أكتوبر ويعهد لخلفه بقيادة مفاوضات الخروج من الاتحاد. الخروج يقسم بريطانيا داخليا ويدفع اليمين الأوروبي المتطرف إلى المطالبة باستفتاء على الوحدة. ألمانيا وفرنسا تعتبران خروج بريطانيا يوما حزينا، والبرلمان الأوروبي يتحدث عن مسار بريطاني صعب. أهلا بكم مشاهدينا إلى هذه النشرة المفصلة تأتيكم من العربية.
This is Sky News Live in Westminster. The Prime Minister resigns after the UK votes to leave the European Union. David Cameron says the country will have a new leader by October.
There is no need for a precise timetable today, but in my view we should aim to have a new Prime Minister in place by the start of the Conservative Party conference in October. I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
The referendum was decided by more than 1 million votes, with the Leave side edging victory with around 52% of the vote. It led to huge celebrations for their supporters, with Nigel Farage calling it a win for real people.
June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day.
The effect has been immediate, with the value of the pound collapsing to its lowest level against the dollar since 1985. But it's being hailed as a new dawn in Westminster, with huge implications for both the Conservative Party and Labour.
And I'm live in Edinburgh, where this result could lead now to a second vote for independence after Scotland as a whole voted overwhelmingly to remain.
A very good morning. This is a Sky News Special live from Westminster, as after 43 years the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
UKIP's Nigel Farage celebrates as Britain votes to leave the European Union. Final results are in, and the Leave campaign has shocked Europe and much of the world with its victory. David Cameron has now lost the biggest gamble of his political career. The British Prime Minister's time in office is coming to an end as he announces his intention to resign by this fall. And the Brexit sends shockwaves across global markets, ushering in a period of high uncertainty. Sterling hits its lowest point in over 3 decades. You're watching France 24's continuing coverage of Britain's EU referendum. I'm Molly Hall here in Paris, and once again, Europe has woken up to a whole new reality today. The results are in, and Britain has voted to leave the European Union. Now, 52% of people opted to exit, while 48% chose to stay in.
– 10h25, notre édition spéciale se poursuit sur i-Télé. C'est donc un vote clair, sans appel et définitif. À 51,9%, les Britanniques ont donc dit non à l'Europe. On n'a pas fini de parler et d'évaluer les différentes conséquences économiques, politiques et financières de ce résultat. Et s'il y a un parti en France qui se réjouit ce matin, c'est bien le Front National. Marine Le Pen salue une victoire de la liberté et réclame.
Mit dem Brexit verliert die Europäische Union ein zentrales Mitgliedsland. Großbritannien ist die zweitgrößte Volkswirtschaft der Union mit dem wichtigen Handelsplatz London. Kritiker eines Austritts Großbritanniens hatten vor dem Referendum vor allem vor den wirtschaftlichen Folgen für Großbritannien gewarnt.
Großbritannien und die Europäische Union sind wirtschaftlich eng miteinander verbunden, auch ohne den Euro. 63% des britischen Außenhandels gehen, direkt oder indirekt, in die EU. Mehr als 50% der Importe nach Großbritannien kommen aus der EU. Mit der Entscheidung für den Brexit werden jetzt dramatische Folgen erwartet. Die Bank von England rechnet mit einem Wachstumseinbruch von bis zu 6%. 800.000 Arbeitsplätze sind unmittelbar gefährdet, so die Schätzung. Auch der Wert des britischen Pfund ist in Gefahr. 20% weniger, so die Aussicht. Das alles kann sehr schnell eintreten, obwohl Großbritannien voraussichtlich noch 2 Jahre in der EU bleiben wird. So lange lässt der EU-Vertrag von Lissabon Zeit zum Verhandeln der Austrittsbedingungen.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 25 minutes past 10. If you've just joined us overnight, it was confirmed that we have voted to leave the European Union. A couple of hours ago, the Prime Minister said he was going to resign as Prime Minister, but not immediately, but he would be gone by the time his party gathers for its conference in October. Chris Shipp broke that news, reported on it earlier, and is still there live for us in Downing Street. Chris.
A place in the sun is here at 12:20, but now on 4. It's the post-EU referendum result. It's an earlier and extended Channel 4 News with Krishnan Gurumurthy.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
Cameron resigns as Britain votes to leave the European Union. Angry questions and a hostile crowd for the man who could soon be Prime Minister as he declared victory.
I believe the British people have spoken up for democracy in Britain and across Europe. And I think we can be very proud of the result.
Good morning from Westminster, the heart of the establishment whose desire to stay in the EU has been sensationally rejected by 51.9% of voters. But the referendum has left the country sharply divided. Leave won the referendum by 51.9% to 48.1% for Remain. That's more than 17 million people voting to quit the EU to 16 million against, with overwhelming majorities in almost every English region outside London, from large northern cities across the Midlands to the south and east of England, as well as Wales. The capital bucked the trend. 59% backed Remain. All 32 counties in Scotland also voted to stay, along with Northern Ireland, by a majority of 100,000.
NHK World TV from Japan.
It's 8 p.m. in Japan. Welcome to Newsroom Tokyo. I'm Shobeppu.
And I'm Aki Shibuya.
First, the headlines.
The people of Britain have made their decision. They voted in a referendum to leave the European Union. The result sent shockwaves through global financial markets. In Tokyo, the yen surged against the dollar and shares tumbled. The Nikkei suffered its biggest loss in 16 years.
The majority of UK voters say they want to leave the European Union. The final ballots have been counted in a historic referendum over membership in the bloc.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has conceded defeat and says that he'll step down by October. Now we bring in Yuko Fukushima to tell us about the impact on the business world in Asia.
So Yuko, I would say in absolute chaos in the markets. What's going on?
Yeah, it doesn't get much crazier than this. Stock markets around the region have taken a beating, with Tokyo suffering its biggest loss in years. But let's start with foreign exchange. Most currencies were moving up and down as officials in the UK were counting ballots. Then the result came through. The British pound went into free fall, diving almost 10% in value, touching its weakest level in more than 30 years. Now, even more turmoil on the Tokyo stock market. The key index in Nikkei tumbled almost 8% to end the day at 14,952. That's the biggest one-day fall in more than 16 years. In the rest of the region, indexes heading down across the board. All the uncertainty has spooked investors, and they are selling stocks and other risky assets. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong is down almost 3%. In Mumbai, India's Sensex fell 2.25%.
Political earthquake in Britain and the aftershocks are being felt around the world. British voters decided in a referendum to leave the European Union. The Leave campaign won with 52% of the vote, and that sent global markets plunging. The pound fell to its lowest level in 3 decades, and stocks plummeted from London to Tokyo. The vote also means there will be a new leader in the UK. Prime Minister David Cameron led the Remain campaign, and he says he's resigning, and a new prime minister will be in place by October.
This is BBC One. Good afternoon. Now the BBC News at 1 with Sophie Raworth in Downing Street.
A huge moment in history as the UK votes to leave the European Union. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, says he will now stand down. After more than 4 decades in the EU, a decisive vote as more than 17 million people vote to leave. There was jubilation in the Leave camp. UKIP's Nigel Farage called it a victory for ordinary people against the big banks, big business and big politics. Within hours, David Cameron announced he would resign as Prime Minister, saying that fresh leadership was now needed.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Boris Johnson says the UK can be proud of the result and called for a swift exit and calm heads. Dramatic falls for both the pound and for the markets following the news, but the Bank of England says it's taking all necessary steps to keep the economy stable.
We'll be analysing the results in detail after this historic vote. We'll show you the final numbers across the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. Stay with us on BBC News.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1 from Downing Street on a momentous day. After more than 40 years, Britain has voted to end its membership of the European Union. The vote was decisive. 52% chose to leave the EU, 48% wanted to stay. Within hours, David Cameron announced he was standing down as Prime Minister. He said he'd stay in number 10 for the next few months, but that the country required fresh leadership.
You're watching Euronews. This is our live coverage of the UK's referendum on EU membership. And as you've just heard in the past hour, UK Prime Minister David Cameron has announced that he'll resign from his job by October. This was not the result that he was hoping for. It was a gamble that he took to try and stave off the electoral threat of the Eurosceptic UKIP party, but also to keep the Eurosceptic wing of his Conservative Party on side. Tory infighting over Europe cost the 2 previous Conservative Prime Ministers their jobs, John Major and Margaret Thatcher, and it's done just that for David Cameron.
На мой взгляд, нам нужен новый премьер-министр к началу конференции консервативной партии в октябре.
Уйти по-английски. Брексит набрал почти 52% голосов избирателей. Более 17 миллионов человек поддержали выход Объединенного Королевства из Евросоюза. Дэвид Кэмерон покинет свой пост в октябре. Итак, Евросоюз пытается прийти в себя после новостей из Великобритании. Подданные Соединенного Королевства проголосовали за выход из ЕС. Брексит стал прецедентом для объединения. За 60 лет его существования Евросоюз работал только на вход.
أخبار الجزيرة وفيها كاميرون يستقيل عقب صدمة التصويت لخروج بريطانيا من الاتحاد الأوروبي، والجنيه الاسترليني يهوي إلى أدنى مستوى منذ 30 عاما. أهلا بكم إلى التفاصيل. أظهرت النتائج النهائية لاستفتاء بريطانيا التي أعلنت اليوم الجمعة فوز معسكر الخروج من الاتحاد الأوروبي. وأعلنت اللجنة الانتخابية البريطانية للاستفتاء أن 17,400,000 من الناخبين، وهو ما نسبته 51.9% من الأصوات، أيدوا خروج المملكة المتحدة من الاتحاد الأوروبي.
This is Al Jazeera.
Hello and welcome. I'm Peter Dobbie. You're watching the News Hour live from Doha. 60 minutes of news and comment reflecting the momentous events in London.
The British people have spoken up for democracy.
The man who could become the UK's next Prime Minister says the people have decided to take back control after Britain votes to leave the EU.
It's a painful choice and I deeply regret it for the United Kingdom.
The French president asks the EU to reaffirm its values. We'll have all the latest market reaction as it happens to that news as stock markets plunge and the pound hits its lowest level in 30 years. The only story this hour, Britain has voted to become the first country to leave the European Union in a historic referendum, and it's had its first political casualty. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, who called the referendum and had been campaigning to stay in the EU, says he will step down by October. The results have sent the global markets into a tailspin. The British pound is right now at its lowest level since 1985. And the future relationship between one of the world's strongest economies and the rest of the EU looks uncertain. Here's how this deeply polarised country voted. The Leave camp came out on 51.9% of the vote, with Remain on 48.1% of the vote. Al Jazeera correspondents are live across the UK and Europe to bring you the latest updates.
Está pasando hasta ahora en Bruselas, donde se mira con ojos de plato lo que ha ocurrido. Vamos a intentar conocer los datos dentro de un momento con la situación en Bruselas, donde se estaba intentando frenar la posibilidad de que ganara el no a la Unión Europea, pero ha sido imposible. La burocracia europea tiene muy mala fama en el Reino Unido. Vamos a ir hasta allí. Nuestro compañero Guillermo Pascual está al tanto de las novedades. ¿Qué están diciendo en la capital europea, Guillermo?
Pues Vicente, las autoridades europeas se dieron cuenta muy tarde de que esto podía pasar y hoy Bruselas asimila como puede esta noticia porque está en juego ese temido efecto contagio en otros países. Esta mañana el presidente de la Comisión Europea, que ya hablaba de una Europa de 27 países y no de 28, ha dejado claro que quiere que se inicie cuanto antes ese proceso de salida del Reino Unido, aunque sea doloroso. Se viven momentos de mucha tensión y, como advertía hace unos minutos otro primer ministro europeo, este Brexit debe ser un despertador para que Europa espabile.